Hi! If you're interested in making your own mask, one that is pretty and also washable, then stick around. Let me begin by saying that I am not a healthcare professional, and I am making no claims that my mask is going to prevent you from contracting any disease, nor am I instructing you to wear a mask. That said, I recently was visiting Washington State during the initial outbreak of the coronavirus and have placed myself on a 14-day quarantine just in case I have contracted it, although I have no symptoms so far, and only 7 days to go until my quarantine is over. I'm doing this just to be considerate. As of the date of the airing of this video, the coronavirus has been spreading across the United States, and there are a lot of people that are frightened and unsure as to whether or not they need a mask and or whether or not it will keep you safe. And I personally feel that it's nice to have a mask for preventing yourself from possibly spreading any disease to somebody else. It's something that I feel very passionate about, as I would feel terrible if I knew that I made somebody else sick. And I'm sure a lot of you feel the same way. We also want to make sure we don't get sick from wearing a mask, because you can if you don't have the right fabric and you just cover your face with cotton material and you wear this mask all day long. They say that it actually can breed bacteria and make you sick just from wearing the mask. So make sure that you refer to the links below and make an intelligent decision based on research that you yourself has done, not just trust anyone to tell you how to protect yourself. That said, knowing that some materials can actually cause bacteria to grow on them, I decided to look for antimicrobial fabric and couldn't get any in time for this filming, and chose a fabric that is waterproof, thinking maybe that would help to alleviate some of moisture building on the fabric from my breath. Remember, I'm not making any statements saying that this is an accurate science. It was just what I did because I couldn't get antimicrobial fabric in time for this airing. And remember, you're not supposed to just stick a mask on your face and wear it all day long. You're just supposed to wear it when you need it and take it off. You need air. If you make it out of the wrong fabric, you might actually not be able to breathe. So it's important that you do some research. Speaking of breathing, one of the products that we use for the mask is one of our stabilizers. It's called Stick and Tear. This is the stabilizer, and it has the tree frog on the label. So when you go to creativefeet.com, you will notice that all of our stabilizers, when you click on the stabilizer link, each have their own animal character. So you know that you're getting our brand of stabilizer. Stick and Tear is not Stick and Tear that you can find at Joann's Fabrics. And it is very important that you don't mix it up, because Stick and Tear, we make it, we're the producers of it. It is actually made from filter material. So we're going to add this to our fabric to make the fabric able to block even more molecules. And I'm not saying that it's going to prevent disease, but it makes me feel better knowing that I am adding something to the fabric to make it really better for breathing, especially because I'm also going to be using this when I turn my wonderful fabric pressers for you. It is much better fitting than the traditional mask that I was already using, and it made my face really uncomfortable. I was constantly trying to form this around my nose, and this just fits my face beautifully, and I hope that it will do the same for you. My heart goes out to all who are affected by the coronavirus and any other flu, illness, and also to those living in Tennessee where the current tornadoes did such devastation. It's heartbreaking, and it is what makes us Americans. We come together during times of crisis. Be kind to one another. This is a very sensitive time. If somebody wants to wear a mask, no one should make them feel bad for that. If you don't want to wear one, that's fine. Remember, sewing is supposed to be fun. Life is supposed to be full of warm, loving moments. We'll get through this together. We're Americans. As always, I took as much time as possible to research and learn as much as I possibly could to ensure that I was not only keeping myself safe, but also you as best I could. And despite the fact that I am not telling you to actually wear a mask. For those of you who didn't know, our stick and tear stabilizer is actually a permanent stabilizer. It's made from polyester. It has an adhesive on it that adheres it to fabric without using an iron, and it goes through the washer and the dryer fine. Just to show you, I actually didn't back the first mask that I made so that you could see how it looks after being put through a full load of laundry and also through a high heat temperature drying process. You can see that there is no evidence of any breakdown anywhere on the actual stabilizer. So this is why I highly recommend that you use our stick and tear stabilizer to back your fabric, no matter what fabric you've chosen to use. There are also sprays that you can spray onto fabric to make it antimicrobial. Just be careful to read those labels to make sure that the breathing it so close to your face is actually healthy for you. And since they say that the most important thing for killing any kind of virus is to wash your hands with soap and water, washing this with soap and water in your washing machine, I believe should kill any of the virus that may be on it. But I chose to wash mine in hot water, and my laundry detergent does say it's antibacterial, so crossing fingers it works. Because remember, I'm not saying that I know all about anything. I'm just teaching you how to make one of these nice, comfortable masks and hope that you find this video beneficial. When I was trying to find an antimicrobial fabric, I found it very challenging, and that means you will as well. I chose this waterproof material, hoping that it will help to alleviate the buildup of moisture within the mask. And I'm not a scientist, so I don't know if it's true or not. So do this at your own risk. And they say not to wear your mask all the time. Only wear it when you need it. Remember, the links below are your answers to all of the scientific questions that you may have regarding an outbreak of any type of illness or virus or bacteria that spreads around among the community. This fabric I found inside of the upholstery department, and it has a relatively tight weave, but it only came in white. And yes, most masks are white, but I am a sewer, and odds are so are a good amount of you, and you might want yours to be pretty. So what I did was use the inks that we offer at creativefeet.com, and I am providing a link to a video showing you how to print or create your own fabric patterns using these inks. So you can transform a plain white fabric into a fabric like you see here. I used the inks as well for the fabric that I've chosen to use today for showing you how to make your own mask. So let's get to it. I'm sure you've noticed that every face is not the same shape, so seems like it makes sense that one mask will not fit every face equally. So there isn't one size to cut your fabric. You should measure using maybe a string to go from cheekbone to cheekbone and go around and up and over your nose and see how long your mask should be to comfortably fit across your face. And if you look at this mask, you're going to notice that the elastic straps are very short. They're not very big at all. And you're going to want the same thing. You're going to want your elastic straps to be relatively short and cover the most of your face as possible so that you have more protection. I also found it fits the face better if it is longer. This tube that I sewed to one side is made of a fabric that can scrunch up and gather up. If you use a fabric that's too stiff for that, then it won't fit as nicely to your face. And I didn't feel that it mattered if this area was cotton because it's nowhere near where I breathe. So adding that complementary color made it a little bit more stylish. And then we're going to use elastic. You're going to use Some elastic where it's going to show, as you see here, on these outside edges, and then elastic that's going to be inside of the mask, where I have chosen to use the same material, but I left it just plain white. Choosing the right elastic is important. This would be too thick to go over your ear. And this is a fold over elastic, which is pretty, but it's really like double the amount of elastic that you would use. So these would not be good options, but this is really pretty, having a nice color to match your fabric. Since most of your elastic options are going to be plain white, take a little bit of water. Select from one of our inks that are available at creativefeet.com and add it to the water. You want to stir it up. And the more ink in the water, the darker the blue will get. There's one where I've already put ink on it and it's not quite dark enough for my liking. You can see how much darker it gets when you have more ink combined with the water. And this will stay through washings. So go ahead and, if you want, make your elastic for your mask to match the fabric that you've chosen. And you can see how beautifully that blue will go with this fabric, which I also inked using these fabric inks. And if you do your inking in different steps, you can actually polka dot and create different designs on your actual elastic. The elastic that goes over the nose will be exposed, so you may want to use a white, or go ahead and keep it in the same color scheme and make your own elastic color the color that you want it to be. So for my face, I measure 9 inches from cheekbone to cheekbone, and 7.5 is a good distance for me. For 1 inch beneath my chin and up onto the top of my nose, I found that 7.5 inches was a good size for me. So if your face is longer, you want to measure, you may want to add a little bit, and we can always take it in as you sew to make it fit even better. You've probably noticed that a lot of the medical masks have folds in them to make them form fit around the face. And I chose that type of construction because it seemed that it would be much more comfortable than just a rigid shape or cone shape, since your mouth moves and your face moves. Having the fabric also be able to move seemed like a better option. See how I've chosen to use clips to hold the folds in place for me? Before we fold the fabric, we need to adhere the stick and tear stabilizer to the wrong side of the fabric that we've chosen for the outside, or the fabric that people will see, not the lining fabric. I didn't feel that I needed 2 layers of our stick and tear inside of the mask to protect myself. Also, I felt like it might hinder breathing because you need air. So remember, you don't want to have, like, I actually saw someone teaching you to put vinyl inside of a mask, and that's the closest thing to a bag that you can get, so be careful. Stick and tear has a release liner that you remove, so you can fold back really close to the corner, just a little fold, and then it'll start to separate like that. Then you go ahead and just peel that back. It's good to have a good clean surface area while working on this. Considering what you're making, disinfect your area before working on this. This is the inside lining fabric that's going to filter the air for you. And this release liner is actually freezer paper like paper, so that you can use it anytime you've been told to use freezer paper. And so it's not trash, you can save it. It's a lot easier to cut your fabric with the stick and tear being a little bit bigger, just like when you make a quilt and you have your batting stick out longer. and then cut afterward. This is one of the rolling rulers, and I will leave a link in the description below if you'd like to get yourself a set of these. I really like them because they allow you to slide from one end to the other, and they don't tip on you, so it can kind of help you to know if you're square on something. However, this ruler has a very low profile, so you want to be careful to not ride your rotary cutter up on top of this ruler when using it. I use it primarily for drawing lines on fabric, but you can use it to cut. You don't want to stick this just to anything because it will really hold well, which is why it's so fabulous for this. Even through a washing machine load with a bunch of heavy towels, it stays really, really bonded to the fabric. So it will stick to your sewing machine or your table and you'll have trouble getting it off. So I just like to fold it back on itself. So you can see the similarity in the fiber of our stick and tear versus this mask. However, this is like scratchy and this one is not. This is a lot softer. So you could just have this be the backing if you're in a hurry and you want to make a mask quicker and not line it as I'm about to do. We have our lining fabric and the top material, and what you want to do is you want to crease both of them separately so that on the end it ends up being about 4 inches for me, and that has to do with how big your jawline is and how large your ear may be. So if you have a longer jaw, you don't want it to squish your ear, so you want to make sure that the end that goes next to your ear is at least the same as your ear. It's going to kind of fold in on your ear and make you feel like touching it. And the more you touch your face, the more likely you are to become infected. If you're out and about and you're touching something that was already contaminated, remember, if you are not in possession of a virus and you live alone and your house is clean, it's not like it's going to pop up in your house. I'm pretty sure of that. So how I prepared this was I fold my fabric right side together in half to find the center of my actual mask fabric, and then you can press it or use one of our pressers. Know that this is not sensitive to heat, so you're more than welcome to use a cotton setting to iron your fabric should you want to use a traditional iron instead of one of my wooden pressers. But you can see how beautiful the wooden presser creases. For an easier time marking your mask, I like to use the rolling ruler and the Caterpillar light tablet, as the cutting mat on the Caterpillar light tablets is actually a see-through mat with a lot of different line references on it, and you can turn it on just by tapping on it. Different levels of brightness for whatever you're doing. That's a little bit too harsh for my eyesight, so I'm going to take it down to the second. Because the second light setting, I can see the lines actually through the fabric, which makes it awesome for knowing that you're squared if you're trying to square something off, and also that the lines are going to be true on both sides of the mask. This is not a very precision item that we're making, but isn't it nice to know that we can be precise when we want to be? You'll find the link to the Caterpillar products at creativefeet.com, located in the description below. I got my center line lined up with one of the lines on the mat, and make sure that it's accurate on both sides of the mat. And I know that that is my center, so I go out 1/2 inch, and this board is broken down by 1/4 inch increments, so you can be really accurate. Now I do my small mark for a 1/2 inch mark. I'm going to come out 1/4 inch and mark another small mark. Go to the next 1/2 inch mark, and this is the outside of that actual pleat. So we draw a long line, then we go back to the 1/2 inch mark, do a small mark, go out a 1/4 inch, make your small mark, come over a 1/2 inch, do your large mark representing the outside of your pleat, come over, and now we are ready to do our small mark again. And we switch to the opposite side, go to the 1/4 inch mark, mark it, slide out to 1/2 inch, and mark it big. Go to the next 1/2 inch and mark it small, and so on. When you're finished, this is what the marks will look like. Long line, too small, long line, too small. What I used here is the friction pen, and a friction pen disappears from an iron. So if I draw all these lines and then go to the iron and iron the lines, then what happens to the lines? They disappear. So using our wooden presser is definitely ideal for this, definitely better for you than finger pressing. So on all the big lines, I just take and fold the fabric, and I'm going to press all the way across. Go to my next long line section and press. And that forms a nice fold. Next, after you've pressed, you go ahead and bring it together and grab a clip and clip that so it holds it in place. And the next one. And then when you're finished with that, we're going to go ahead and use the Liquid Baste basting glue, which is a water-soluble stabilizer in a bottle that's wet, eliminating the need for the clips for the sewing part. So you want to take and you want to put a little bit of the glue on this side, slide your finger gently across it, and then close it. Go inside and close it. Come up to the next one, and then close it. Open it up, slide your finger across, close it, and again. Now, it's going to separate if we don't keep holding it while it dries, because this fabric is stiffer as a result of using our stick and tear stabilizer to line the back of the material. So go ahead and use the clips, and why I like this version of the clip is it will go past where I glued and just gently hold it on. So you see how it's really not touching right here, so it's not going to push the glue through the material and cause it to separate. Another way of doing it would be to go this direction using another clip, but I don't know if they'd be long enough for you. So we just go over and let that fully dry before you go to the sewing machine with it. And after you've done that, you want to measure and make sure that it is the measurement that I mentioned before for your ear. So it's not smaller than that. We still have a seam allowance to sew on here as well. If you measured your mask and it goes all the way to your ear, you won't have anywhere to add that fabric that I mentioned before that's going to scrunch up and make it more form-fitting to your face. So this is your chance to make an adjustment to it to make sure that this is not too long for the final construction of your mask. Now on the lining fabric, we're going to go ahead and do the same steps. Go ahead and fold your fabric with right side facing in. And finding your center, press. Now you get the hang of using this light board. You can even fold it up and know that you're folded up to the 1/2 inch mark by looking through the fabric and pressing. And we can actually build it as we go without using any marker at all. So you see how you can also do this without drawing lines by finding your crease, fold it down, and you can see through this for your 1/2 inch mark. You can just take and compare and make sure you've got them the right size. And next step is to make the tube that's going to protrude out on the sides for your elastic to be inserted into. So what you want is you want to make your shape by folding under so that it's going to allow you to actually sew this into the seam without this edge being stitched into the actual fabric, so that when you're done you can actually thread your elastic through this, which is in essence kind of like a binding but also a tube. We want our fabric, this piece that's going to be stitched in, to actually allow for a seam allowance to go on either side. And this way we have no exposed seams on this mask when we're finished. To make it easier, after pressing it over, glue these flaps closed just to keep them from shifting on you. And do that with both sides. When I'm not using my light tablet, I like to turn it off. It'll extend the life of the tablet and reduce electricity. I'm going to use the Satinedge foot to help position my stitch so that it's accurate. This is a foot I invented for a woman who was born blind. So it does help you to sew straight. Of course, the item we're making is not that precise, but I do like to know that my stitches are positioned nicely along the edge of something. This foot attaches to your machine using either the traditional universal snap-on adapter, or you can use one of the adapters that are included. There's instructions with the foot to make it so that it'll attach to your sewing machine. Even if you have multiple makes and models of machines in your home, this foot will attach to all of them. Refer to our information at creativefeet.com to learn more. This foot has a little wire that is what actually guides the fabric, and by positioning it, you can either position it left or right of your sewing machine needle for a straight stitch. So I can have the fabric be this way, or I can flip it around and position the guide so that the wire is to the right of the sewing machine needle. Since this is going to be enclosed, I didn't feel the need to do a double fold on this. I think it'll hold up nicely through washings. And if you're nervous about using our liquid base glue, it's water-soluble stabilizer in a bottle that when it dries becomes like this, and it's not stretchy. So it actually locks the bias in the fabric, making it, if it were a stretch fabric, act like a non-stretch fabric. You bring the needle down close to the fabric, move the guide over however far you want your stitch to be away from the edge. And instead of watching your sewing machine needle, now you watch the white part of the guide, and you can just gently push toward the foot and it will actually guide the fabric for you so that you maintain an accurate distance from the actual edge of the material, despite the fact that that is a very thin, just single layer of fabric. When you're finished, you have accurate sewing. So we're going to repeat that on all 4 of the folds. And then fold the fabric over, lining up your raw edges. And go ahead and press. And then to keep the fabrics from slipping on you or shifting on you when they're inside of the 2 layers of the mask, we're going to go ahead and use the glue again to just draw a line across the edge. And then you just slide your finger across. It kind of joins those dots together, and then just close that up. Once again, clip it, set it aside, do the next one. When you glue, you don't want to glue too far over, because we want to be able to insert our elastic into this. So it's about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge that we apply the glue on these tubes, and then close it up. On lighter weight fabrics, it tends to hold without a clip, but just to be sure, you can go ahead and clip it and wait for it to dry. Drying time is a few minutes. Probably when you're ready to do the next step, by then it'll be dry enough, because remember, it's just water inside that keeps it from drying. As soon as it evaporates, all you're left with is that non-stretch stabilizer that I just showed you. And we have our outer fabric with the stick and tear stabilizer attached to it, the lining fabric all pleated up and ready to go, and our 2 tubes for feeding the elastic through. Now, before we construct all of these, we're going to insert elastic in to help it form to your face. So that's what you see on this area here, and where you don't see the elastic at all is because I inserted it into the actual mask, sewed it, and then I encased it afterward. The length of elastic that I chose for mine was a 4-inch spanse. That does not mean that the elastic itself is 4 inches. So if you have a 4-inch distance that you're going to stretch, you're going to stretch your elastic to that 4-inch distance, and then it will gather up and cause the fabric to bunch together, which causes it to drop beneath your chin and hug on to your face. Should be able to remove your clips now and have your fabric hold. As I remove clips, I insert them into my little caddy here. They call this the cubby, and it's designed for your clip-it clips to insert into. It reminds me of the Star Wars, and they come in with the ships and they dock, and it just docks them. And it'll even dock other clips, not just theirs. Now I'm taking the tube and I'm going to position it onto the fabric so that it is inside a 1/4 of an inch. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to sew this into the seam. Now I'm going to take it, I'm going to put right sides together so that it looks the same on top and bottom. So you can see that the folds are facing up. That means that I want this fabric, the folds, to also go up. And we take and position them together. And I'm going to go ahead and apply some of the Liquid Baste as well on this to kind of keep it all together. You could pin if you like. Just remember, you should not sew over pins. It's never a good idea. So I have the seam allowance allowed for. If you had this all the way to the edge, you would close up your tube, and you wouldn't have a tube to feed the elastic through if you did that. So the next step is to sew from one end to the other on a 1/4 inch. It's much easier to have the folds facing towards you rather than having the folds go this way and have the foot have to contend with them. So have it go this way. It's not that important that you achieve a 1/4 inch for this. I'm going to go ahead and start in from the edge and sew a couple stitches forward, then go reverse, and then come back again. Keeping my eye here, not at the needle, but right there. Just kind of pushing the fabric toward the foot. I'm using a 90-14 universal needle for the construction of this. And we're going to go ahead and repeat that on the other side. I can't sew the lining fabric up this time because the folds are pointing in that direction, so I flip it over and we'll sew on the stabilizer side. If you have difficulty getting the foot to go over all that thickness, increasing your stitch length will increase the pull of the feed dogs for every stitch and make it easier for you to go over these thicknesses. Now we're going to sew on these two sides, but we need to leave an area to turn this right side out when we're finished. And we also have another concern, that tube that we have inserted inside of there, we need to make sure that that tube cannot actually get stitched into the seam, or you will not have any way to feed your elastic through. Like this. And then take a pin and just pin it so that it doesn't slip on you. You could also use clips, but it is going to be a challenge to use a clip if it's sitting right next to the foot. This is the chin side, so we can go all the way down now, making sure you keep your edges together. As you approach, you want to feel and make sure you're not going to stitch the tube closed on this side either. Okay, then we're going to remove the pins. Now I'm going to remove the Satinedge foot and put on my Sequins and Ribbon Foot. Sequins and Ribbon Foot is a unique patented foot. The unique bottom that locks your elastic into your feed dogs. The proper settings for sewing the elastic is going to be the multiple zigzag or 3-step zigzag. It has a stitch that goes stitch, 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 or zig, 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 zag, 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 also known as the serpentine stitch on the Bernina. You can use this one as well as a regular zigzag stitch if you don't have one of those. And then I'm going to use a 5mm wide width, and I'm going to lengthen the stitch length all the way to the longest stitch length my machine will do. In addition to that, on this machine, this is where I access my pressure, foot pressure, and I have it at the normal setting. So if you have released your pressure to do applique or other fun projects, make sure that you check your pressure setting. You also may have a silver disc on the top that you push and release. Refer to your instruction manual on your sewing machine to learn how to apply a normal standard pressure on the presser foot. I've also selected polyester thread to be used in the needle and the bobbin. Now I'd marked my chin, and I wrote chin on this side and nose on that side to help me remember as I sew, because it can get confusing. And while the chin is a 4-inch space, I have a 3-inch section of elastic already marked. So as I sew, I'm going to line up one mark, and then I'm going to stretch the elastic all the way to the far end. And that is how you end up with equal gathers between the two marks. This guide is equipped with a 1/4 inch opening, but we do offer additional guides for this foot to sew narrower elastics and wider elastics. However, you can use this foot even if you want to sew 1-inch wide elastic, as we don't need the guide to actually sew the elastic. However, having a guide does make it nice in this case because we're using narrower elastic. So just insert it right into the tube. And we're going to want to see that line that we marked for the beginning of the elastic and line it up with the line on the fabric. I put the elastic in the foot before I attach it to the machine, just because it's easier. I'm going to pull the folds away just to make sure I don't stitch it under the elastic, and there's folds on both sides, so I've pulled away the back and the top of the folds that will be expanding when we put the mask on our face. So I know that I am not stitching them and preventing that from happening when we put the mask on. Before you start pulling, we want to sew some stitches in place. You can put your stitch length on 0 for the first few stitches, or lower your feed dog so that you can stitch in place to really secure the end of that elastic. And now we're going to go ahead and raise the feed dogs back up again, and the feed dogs will resume pulling the fabric through. And I have it set for 5mm stitch length, so it's going to pull through really far. Every time the stitch sews a stitch, it's going to pull 5mm to the next stitch. And this, in essence, makes your machine stronger so that you can pull towards you, and you don't have to pull behind the foot on the elastic like you do with other feet made by other companies. Now I just take the elastic and pull until it lines up with that second mark. And the machine will do the rest of the hard work for you. Not looking at the needle, but watching that line, and just keep lining it up there. Then you're going to go ahead and lower your feed dogs or shorten your stitch length and secure the other end, just as you did before. And you can see how the fabric is bunching up. We'll go ahead and cut the elastic. So it has just a little bit of a gather. We're going to turn this now right side out before sewing the nose elastic in place. I'm just reaching in and feeling for the tube that I stitched in, as it's a perfect little handle for pulling the right side out. And then just pull it right side out. And you can see that it's not very straight. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and stitch a top stitch. And what you want to do is you want to take it to the iron and you want to press this so that the edges line up with each other like that. Another thing I like to do if I have something that's challenging to hold in place, I like to pin it to my ironing board. And now that substitutes for my finger. Press this side as well. In this case, you probably don't need the iron. Just use the presser. You can see how nice and crisp that is. And then we're going to go ahead and edge stitch this down. An edge stitch is when you sew a distance away from the edge of your fabric, and we're going to edge stitch this side and this side, which will make this not so out of control. But I'm not going to just trust the ironing that I did to hold this together. I'm going to go ahead once again and use our Liquid Baste and close up that opening. You can also use the iron to speed up the drying time of the stabilizer should you want. And now it's held in place and looks like it's already sewn, even though it's not. You'll notice that the foot tips, and that is why I have this always ready as I work with thicker materials, to just set it there and it will level off the presser foot. Just go ahead and secure the beginning of your stitch as well. Keep your eye right there, or simply try to not have your stitches change as you go along the edge. And sew. And there's nothing holding that to the actual sewing machine. Just stays there. Something else. And secure the end. See how nice that edge stitch is? Okay, we're going to do this now again on the other side. I think I'm going to go a little bit further in on the stitch on this side since we don't have a closure to worry about, by moving the guide further away from the needle. And what I'm doing is pulling the fabric flat, trying not to pull it too hard, because you want the feed dogs to still feed the fabric through. Now you can see how much nicer that looks. But it still has the tuck that is created by sewing the elastic on that will position this better beneath my chin. Now I'm going to go ahead and sew the nose. And I can't see the marks because they're inside the seam, so you just want to fold your fabric again in half to find the center point, and then mark that center point. And we're going to go ahead and go 1 inch out from there and mark, and 1 inch out from there and mark. And this is where we place our second piece of elastic, and we're going to do so stitching it flat on the outside of the inside lining of our mask. Okay, switching feet back to the sequins and ribbon foot, because we need that lock that it does to the feed dogs when sewing the elastic. I'm lining up that first mark after we put it in the foot, and then we're going to stretch to the second mark for the nose. Insert the elastic inside of the tube, put the foot on, and what we're trying for is to line up that first mark on the elastic with the mark on the fabric so that we can see it, so that we can stitch right on that mark. And now we're going to change back to a multiple zigzag stitch, also known as a tricot stitch, serpentine stitch, and lengthen the stitch to the longest stitch your machine has. And on mine it goes to 5.0 millimeters. Secures the beginning of the stitch with our feed dogs lowered. Then bring the feed dogs back up again, and then just pull, keeping your eye on that mark. Lower those feed dogs and secure as before, or once again, you could also shorten your stitch length. Now we'll go ahead and pull this out. Cut the elastic. And now your mask forms this cone shape appearance. And forms to your face. Next step is to put the elastic loops through. So you can just take a safety pin and pin right through the end of your elastic. Go through that tube, or if you have any other type of feeding technique that you like to use, and just go through. Comes out the other end. This is where you're going to go ahead and remove the safety pin and tie a knot. After making one for myself before, I know that a 7-inch piece of elastic is adequate for me to tie a knot and then still be able to go over my ears without feeling as though my ears are getting pulled down. So just go ahead and tie a knot. And as we do this, we're trying not to tie the knot down low. So you want to kind of keep the knot toward the end of the elastic. So I grab the two ends now and kind of just stretch the elastic up and pull, because you're going to be stretching on it. So you want to make sure it's a good knot. And then you just pull, and the knot will go inside of the tube, leaving you with this little loop. And I recommend you don't stitch the elastic to the tube should the elastic start to weaken and you need to replace it. And also because it may pull hard on your ear and make you want to fiddle with it more. Now, if you had more elastic, you could have a longer piece here and tie it, and it would be a lot easier. I have a large quantity of elastic somewhere. I put it somewhere safe. Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever lost something just because you put it in a place you could never lose it? So I'll go ahead and stretch and pull that tight. And there you have it. A mask that easily goes on and hugs the cheeks. The chin is very sturdy and very comfortable. And when you get makeup on it, well, you could throw it in the wash and use it the next time. I hope that you found this video beneficial. If you did, go ahead and hit that like button, share it with your friends. And if you've yet to subscribe to my channel, well, I sure hope you'll do so today. Remember, these are difficult times for many. Be kind to one another and be well. I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.